The night my son called me a useless old woman, something inside me went quiet. Not broken, just still. As if my heart needed silence to understand what my ears had just heard. I spent 72 years surviving grief, widowhood, and the slow ache of loneliness, but nothing prepared me for the moment my own child looked at me with irritation instead of love. I didn't know then that his words were only the beginning. That behind his impatience lived secrets, paperwork I never signed, conversations I wasn't meant to overhear, and plans made in the shadows of my own home. And while most people think old age makes you slow, they forget it also makes you observant. Very observant. This is the story of what I uncovered when I finally opened my eyes, and why I chose the path I did. Hi, I'm Helen Aldridge. And this is my story. I still remember the way Daniel's voice sliced through the room, flat, irritated, as if speaking to me was a chore he had endured for far too long. Mother, stop asking questions. You're acting like a useless old woman. He didn't even look up from his phone. Just said it, casually, like my heart wasn't attached to the body standing in front of him. I felt something inside me shrink, but I kept my voice steady. I was only asking why the bank keeps calling about withdrawals. That's because you forget things, he said, waving me off. They need clarification. But I didn't forget. I wrote everything down. Dates. Amounts. Conversations. Age teaches you how to compensate for what slows down. Later that evening, when I walked past the dining room, I heard him whispering to someone on the phone. She's slipping. We need to move things quickly before she notices. My heart thudded painfully, but I didn't move. I stood there, holding the doorframe, letting his words land one by one. Slipping? Before I notice? I slowly backed away, careful not to let the floorboards creak. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the steam rising from my tea, realizing something I'd never let myself consider before. My own son might not be protecting me. He might be preparing for something else entirely. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel sleepy. I felt alert. Watching. Listening. Because maybe I wasn't the one slipping. Maybe Daniel thought I was easier to mislead than I actually was. The next morning, I woke up with a quiet decision settling in my bones. I needed to start paying attention. And once I did, the first thing I found made my blood run cold. Daniel rarely visited unless he needed something. I used to tell myself he was busy, work, friends, life happening too fast for him to slow down for his mother. But lately, every visit had a pattern. He'd walk in, decline tea, sit at the dining table, and slide a few papers toward me. Just routine updates, Mom. Sign here. He always sounded so sure of himself, as if my signature was a mere formality. I took the papers with trembling hands, pretending to skim them while my heart beat in my throat. I didn't understand most of the legal language, but something felt off. Too many zeros. Too many unfamiliar terms. One afternoon, as he rushed out to catch a meeting, I gathered the papers to file away. That's when I noticed it, my signature at the bottom of a form I had never even seen before. The writing looked similar, but the curve of the H was wrong. The spacing off. A forgery, yes, but not a perfect one. I slipped the page into my sweater pocket like a stolen secret. Later, as I dusted the living room shelves, I listened to the silence around me. A quiet house is comforting when you choose it, but terrifying when it chooses you. Daniel had grown distant, impatient, always in a hurry. And now he was signing things for me. Or pretending to. That evening, while folding laundry, I heard Daniel's voice drift from the porch where he thought I couldn't hear. She won't know. She signs anything. Just give me a few more days. My hands froze mid-fold. A few more days, for what? The next morning, a phone call from the bank would give me my first real answer. The call came at 9:17 a.m., a time Daniel always told me was too early to bother him. Mrs. Aldridge, the voice asked. This is Karen from Wells Federal. I just need to confirm details on your loan application. My what? I held the phone tighter, knuckles turning white. Your loan application, ma'am. It was submitted yesterday evening. My mouth went dry. Yesterday, Daniel had been here. He left abruptly after making 2 phone calls outside. I didn't apply for any loan, I said slowly. A pause. Oh. Well, someone did. Under your name. Someone. Not someone random. Someone with access to my documents. My information. My trust. Did the person mention a relative? I asked, my voice trembling under a thin layer of politeness. Karen hesitated, then answered carefully. He said he was assisting you with finances. I'm not allowed to confirm the name, but he sounded close. Close. My son was close. Too close. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the floral wallpaper I'd chosen 25 years ago. Back then, Daniel was a sweet boy who brought me daisies from the yard, not a man forging loan applications under my name. The kettle whistled, but I didn't move. My mind raced with questions. Had he done this before? How much had he taken? What else had he signed? At noon, I walked into my bedroom and opened the small wooden box where I kept important papers. My hand shook as I flipped through old signatures, comparing strokes, curves, dots. He'd practiced. The evidence was right there. I pressed the box shut and whispered, my own son, why? And then, a discovery in the attic would confirm that this wasn't his first attempt, it was only the latest. The attic smelled of cedar and old memories. I climbed slowly, one hand on the railing, breath steadying as I reached the top. Boxes lined the walls, receipts, old tax returns, my husband's neatly labeled files. He had been an accountant, meticulous with numbers, and I always admired that. Now, his precision might save me. I sat on a wooden stool and began pulling out folders. I compared signatures, my real ones, to the ones Daniel had been handing me. Page after page, the truth unfolded like a slow horror. There were mismatched signatures on documents dated months ago. Investment adjustments. Authorization forms. Even a withdrawal slip for an account I hadn't touched since my husband died. My vision blurred. My son had been chipping away at my life behind my back. A soft knock startled me. It was Mrs. Langley, my elderly neighbor, holding a plate of cookies. I saw Daniel the other day, she said casually as she set the plate down. He was talking to a realtor outside your house. I froze. Realtor? Yes, dear. He said something about you moving into care soon and needing to sell quickly. My heart thudded. I wasn't sick. I wasn't moving. He hadn't discussed any of this with me. Mrs. Langley saw the fear in my eyes. Helen, is everything all right? I swallowed. I'm not sure. When she left, I turned back to the papers, tears falling freely now. My own son, planning to take my home. Replace my life with, what? A care facility? A smaller existence? My hands shook as I gathered every forged document into a stack. The next morning, I marched into my lawyer's office, carrying the entire stack with me. Mr. Carver had been my lawyer for nearly a decade. A gentleman with silver glasses and a habit of tapping his pen when deep in thought. The moment I placed the stack of papers on his desk, his tapping stopped. Helen, he said softly, tell me everything. I explained about the forged signatures, the loan application, the realtor conversation. With every detail, his expression darkened. He slid on his glasses and examined the documents. These aren't amateur mistakes. Whoever did this has access to your personal information. My son, I whispered, ashamed of the words, Daniel. He didn't react with shock. Instead, with a sad understanding, he'd seen this before. Financial abuse of elders, especially by family, is more common than people realize. He pulled out a separate file from his drawer. Did you know Daniel attempted to access your restricted bond account last month? My breath caught. My $22 million bond? He nodded. He tried to authorize a transfer. The bank flagged it because of irregular signature patterns. The room tilted. Daniel wasn't just careless. He was calculated. What do I do now? I asked, voice breaking. Mr. Carver leaned forward. First, we protect everything you own. Then, we gather evidence. Quietly. Documented. Legally. I wiped my eyes. He's my son. He hesitated before saying, but he's not behaving like one. I closed my fingers around the papers. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was fact. And that evening, Daniel sent me a voicemail that shattered any remaining doubt. The voicemail arrived at 8:42 p.m. I was knitting by the fireplace when my phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit up the screen. For a moment, a small, foolish part of me hoped he was calling to apologize. But when I pressed play, his voice spilled out sharp and impatient. Mom, you're being difficult again. You don't understand finances. You never did. Stop questioning me and just sign the damn papers. You're slow, confused, and making everything harder than it needs to be. He laughed, God, that laugh, and added, no wonder Dad handled everything. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the hardwood floor. Slow. Confused. Useless. He used those words so easily, as if they were facts. I got on my knees, picked up the phone, and replayed the message. Every insult. Every dismissal. Proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof, of manipulation. Motherhood broke a little that night. Not in anger, but in grief so deep it felt like drowning. I forwarded the voicemail to Mr. Carver with shaking hands. Then I sat in the dark living room, trying to remember the boy who used to squeeze my hand when he crossed the street. When did that child turn into this man? Or had I missed the signs all along? Mrs. Langley's words echoed in my mind. Is everything all right? No. Everything was not all right. And pretending otherwise had only made things worse. I pulled a notebook from the drawer and began writing down everything: dates, times, signatures, conversations. He thought I was slow. But I wasn't. I was preparing. And the next morning, I would uncover a trail of evidence large enough to expose his entire plan. By sunrise, my kitchen table looked like a command center. Documents spread out in neat rows, my notebook open beside a cup of strong tea. I had slept barely 2 hours, but clarity kept me awake. I began creating a timeline: withdrawals, forms Daniel had brought me, the forged signatures, the bank calls. When placed together, the pattern was unmistakable. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. Around noon, I visited the bank in person. Mr. Hanley, the bank manager, had always been kind to me. When I requested a review of my accounts, his brows knit together with concern. He lowered his voice. Mrs. Aldridge. Daniel was here recently. He asked about end-of-life transfers and what paperwork would be required if you became mentally unfit. My stomach twisted. Mentally unfit? I didn't give him anything, Mr. Hanley assured. But he seemed impatient. Impatient. Desperate. Dangerous. When I returned home, I organized everything into labeled folders. Fraud loves chaos. I would not give him chaos to hide in. Mrs. Langley came by in the afternoon, offering company. I asked her if she'd be willing to witness certain conversations going forward, just in case. Of course, Helen, she said. You're not alone in this. That meant more than she knew. By evening, I felt something new inside me, not fear, not anger. Determination. I called Mr. Carver and told him I had gathered everything. Good, he said. Now we protect your estate legally. After that, we prepare for what Daniel will do next. And right on cue, the next day, Daniel arrived at my door holding cheap flowers and a forced smile. Daniel never brought me flowers. Not even on my birthdays. So when he arrived holding a wilted bouquet of grocery store carnations, I felt my pulse quicken. "Mom," he said warmly, too warmly, "I'm sorry for how I've been. I just want us to get along." His eyes didn't match his tone. They darted around the house, scanning shelves, drawers, the desk where I kept my documents. "Tea?" I asked politely, masking the tremor in my voice. No. I'm in a hurry." He sat down and pulled out a few neatly clipped forms. "I found these new updates for your insurance and investments. Just routine things." Routine. Always routine. I took the papers, pretending to read them as my heartbeat thudded in my ears. The language was vague, the authorization section suspiciously broad. When I looked up, he was watching me too closely. "Mother," he said, voice tightening, "you trust me, right?" A question meant to trap me emotionally. I smiled softly. "Of course, dear." His shoulders relaxed. He believed me. Age had taught me one powerful skill, masking my true thoughts. "I'll sign them today," I added gently. He beamed. "Great. I knew you'd understand." When he left, I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against the wood, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Then I slid the documents into my tote bag and headed straight to Mr. Carver's office. "These," he said after reading them, "are attempts at coercion." "He's accelerating, Helen." "I know," I whispered. And Daniel's next move, made in the dead of night, would trigger a legal trap he never saw coming. Mr. Carver sat me down in his office. "Helen, he's escalating. We need to intervene, but carefully. If we move too early, he'll destroy evidence. If we wait too long, he may succeed." "Tell me what to do," I said. "We'll secure all your accounts with federal oversight. And then, we wait for him to incriminate himself." Waiting sounded excruciating, but I agreed. Investigators set up quiet monitoring on my major financial accounts. I wasn't allowed to tell anyone, not even Mrs. Langley. For days, I moved through my home pretending everything was normal. I cooked meals I barely ate, watered plants I barely saw, and sat in my armchair knitting, hands trembling. On the fourth night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unusual login attempt detected. My heart pounded. I knew that timestamp by heart. Daniel often worked late at night. Investigators confirmed it was an attempt to access my online banking from his device. The trap was working. 2 days later, I received a call from the monitoring officer. "Mrs. Aldridge, he's preparing another transfer. A major one." I closed my eyes. Let it happen. Silence on the line. Then, understood. I spent that evening sitting alone in my living room, sunlight fading as the weight of motherhood pressed on my chest. How strange, to love someone who could destroy you. At dawn, I packed a folder of evidence, everything I had, and placed it by the door. I didn't know what the next day would bring. But I knew what Daniel would do. And when he finally made his move, the consequences would be immediate and irreversible. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was slicing apples when my phone rang. A firm voice said, "Mrs. Aldridge, he's attempting the transfer now. Please remain available." My stomach twisted. "How much?" "Your entire restricted bond account. $22 million. I steadied myself against the counter. This was no longer a careless mistake. It was deliberate theft. Within minutes, officers and investigators surrounded Daniel at his workplace. I wasn't there, but the report later described everything: the moment they approached, the shock on his face when they showed him the authorization attempt, the frantic excuses. And then, "He yelled that you set him up," the officer told me on the phone. Of course he did. But the evidence, my evidence, spoke louder. That evening, I sat at Mr. Carver's desk signing the final confirmation that yes, I was the whistleblower. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From grief. Daniel called from the holding facility hours later. Mom. What did you do? I needed the money. You owe me. Owe him? Motherhood shattered all over again. I can't help you, Daniel, I whispered. You're heartless, he spat. I hung up. Tomorrow, he would call again, this time begging for bail. And I would face the hardest decision of my life. The next morning, the phone rang just after sunrise. Mom, please. His voice was raw, desperate. They're saying I could be in here for years. Just post the bail. I'll fix everything, I swear. I closed my eyes. I remembered tying his shoes on his first day of school. I remembered his small hand in mine at the zoo. I remembered the boy he used to be. But that boy was gone. Daniel, I said quietly, you forged my name. You tried to steal my life savings. You planned to sell my home. You're exaggerating, he shouted. I was trying to help. You don't know what you're doing anymore. Even now, he blamed me. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I realized he wasn't apologizing. He wasn't remorseful. He was terrified of consequences. I can't bail you out, I said softly. You're abandoning me. No, I whispered. You abandoned me long before this. There was silence. Then a click. I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at my trembling hands. Grief washed over me, not for the man Daniel was, but for the mother I had been. The one who believed she could still save him. I folded the blanket I'd been knitting for weeks, placed it neatly on a chair, and exhaled. This was my goodbye. And so, with nothing left to tie me to that house, I packed 2 suitcases and drove toward a new beginning. I found the lakeside house by accident. A quiet real estate listing, a modest cottage with blue shutters, nestled between tall pines and gentle water. When I stepped inside for the first time, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Peace. No echoes of arguments. No fear of footsteps approaching. No documents slipped under my nose. Just quiet. I bought it within a week. Moving day was simple, just 2 suitcases, my knitting basket, and a box of old photographs. I left the grand house Daniel had once planned to sell without looking back. The first evening, I sat on the small porch and listened to the lake brushing against the shoreline. For the first time in months, my lungs felt unclenched. A widowed librarian from next door, Mrs. Grant, stopped by with a casserole. You're new here, she smiled. I'm starting over, I said. She didn't ask why. She just nodded with the kind of understanding only older women seem to share. Over the next week, she taught me the walking paths, the best place to buy fresh bread, and which mornings the sunrise turned the lake gold. But sometimes, at night, loneliness seeped in around the edges. I would sit by my window wondering how motherhood had ended this way. Still, here, the loneliness felt gentle. Healing. And one day, a chance conversation would help me find a new purpose, one I never expected at 72. It happened in the library. Mrs. Grant had invited me to volunteer during reading hour. Just sit with the girls, she said. They love having someone who listens. One afternoon, a teenager named Lily approached me timidly with a stack of budgeting worksheets. I don't get any of this, she said. My mom works 2 jobs. I'm trying to help, but money scares me. I smiled gently. It used to scare me too. But we can learn it slowly. We worked through the sheet together, line by line. Her brows furrowed in concentration, then slowly relaxed. You make it sound easy, she said. It becomes easier when someone explains it without judgment. She hesitated, then whispered, I wish you were my grandmother. Something warm and painful bloomed in my chest. That evening, I sat by the water, thinking. For so long, my money had been a burden, something Daniel wanted, something he tried to steal. But here, teaching these girls, it became a tool again. A shield. A choice. I began offering weekly financial basics to young women: budgeting, safety, understanding documents. They came shy, nervous, often embarrassed. I welcomed them all. Helping them felt like piecing myself back together. And little by little, the ache of Daniel's betrayal softened, not erased, but no longer defining me. And it was during one of these quiet classes that I realized exactly how I wanted to use my wealth, in a way Daniel never could have imagined. I stood at the lake's edge, the water calm and shimmering, and thought about the road that brought me here. Age didn't make me useless. Trust didn't make me weak. And love, real love, does not excuse cruelty. Daniel believed my years had dulled me, that I couldn't see what he was doing. He was wrong. Age sharpens the senses life tries to dull. Over months, I redirected part of my fortune into a quiet fund supporting women escaping financial abuse. No announcements. No plaques. Just quiet help, anonymous, steady, life-altering. I often wondered if Daniel understood the gravity of his actions now. Whether he felt regret or only resentment. I stopped checking the updates from the court. Peace didn't require knowing his fate. What mattered was my own. In my cottage, I brewed tea, opened the window to let the lake breeze in, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not the loud kind. The gentle kind that settles in your bones when you finally choose yourself. I closed my notebook, the one I had filled with dates, evidence, heartbreak, and eventually, healing, and whispered to the quiet room. I may have lost a son, but I found myself. This is the story of how age didn't break me. It saved me.